Good. Good. Jesse, how are you?
I'm great, thanks, man. Thanks for having me. It's
That's
great to meet you.
Yeah, you too. You too. It was weird. Like I was after I did the one with Ollie a couple of weeks ago. I don't generally go like scouring the internet looking for people. I just generally see who gets thrown up naturally.
Right.
And I was like,
The
oh, who's this?
algorithm.
Yeah, I thought, oh, who's this dude? I was like, oh shit, oh he's with Ollie. Oh cool. And then yeah, you do the rock show as well. And I was like, wow, that should be pretty interesting because you're obviously dividing your time between the UK and going over to the States.
Yeah, I sort of do. I mean, we can get into it obviously, but I do a bunch of different shows.
Mm,
Obviously based out of West London, but I sort of my main job really is touring
yeah,
and performing concerts kind of all over the place, really. I think this year, where are we now? We're sort of in, is it June? I
it
think
is, Jude. Yeah.
I think I've done about 12 countries or something this year.
Okay.
Touring. So I've been to the US a couple of times, Canada, and then all over Europe and obviously a bunch of shows in the UK as well. So yeah, it's I really love what I'm doing, man. I'm really blessed to do what I do.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's sort of roughly what I'm doing at the moment. But obviously we can deep dive into the different
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
want.
Yeah. Yeah. It's cool. So yeah, so the two shows that I know you from, obviously the 1971 show that you do with Ollie,
Yeah.
and then the classic rock show. Is it the classic rock show
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
with Pete Thorne?
Pete Thorne,
And
Wayne
it's a,
Banks,
it's a,
Tim Brown, and it's an amazing band. Yeah,
so
amazing band.
how did that come about?
Well, like most of the gigs I've ended up doing, Tim, it was like a Tuesday night, I think, about 6, 7 years ago now, and I kind of have this thing where I try and just put things out into the world and make things happen. And a friend of mine, a guy called Ricardo Afonso, is a great rock and theatre singer.
Mm,
That I sort of crossed paths with in the West End when I was younger. He was singing on this show, the Classic Rock Show, and I'd seen some stuff on YouTube, and I thought, oh, that looks really cool. Actually, that's right up my street because it's all my
mm.
favorite music.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just out of the blue sent him a message just saying, hey man, um, just in a video of you singing whatever it was. I think Mr. Blue Sky or something. I was
Yeah.
like, if you ever need someone for that gig, I would totally love to do it. Hope you're well. Lots of love.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize, but he wasn't on the show anymore. And then that exact thing happened a few weeks later. So one of their singers at the time was sick. Did the first song and then went, "No, I'm out. I can't." Just lost his voice totally.
Yeah.
And so they sort of managed to get through the show. And then after the show that night, I honestly think it was about 11, half 11 at night. I had a call from James Cole, um, who's the producer on the show, saying, Ricardo passed your name across, and do you know these songs? It's
Mm.
just like a list of songs. And I looked at the set list and I went, I think I know all of them except two of them.
Yeah.
And he went, cool, do you want to come and do the show tomorrow? And I got straight on the train and went to Leicester, and I did the first show at De Montfort Hall in Leicester that following night, and I've been in the band ever since, and that was 7 years ago.
Wow.
Um,
Isn't that
and that,
great? Isn't that great when you get a
yeah.
dep call and you look at the set list and go, "Yeah, I can do all of them."
Well, I
And you,
think sometimes you're the right person for the right gig, aren't you?
yeah, yeah,
You know. So yeah, that exact thing. I think I hadn't done Bat Out of Hell before, which
mm,
was a bit of a learn.
yeah.
And then there was Logical Song by Supertramp, which is a bit wordy, which I hadn't done before either. But all the rest of them were like, all the rock songs that I
All
grew
your
up
standards,
playing
yeah,
and singing. Yeah, some were sort of even a little bit left field, but I knew them anyway. So
yeah.
and the show's brilliant, man. I mean, it's difficult to explain what it is until you see it, because it's basically, in essence, it's a cover band, right?
Yeah.
But it's a cover band that really focus on the detail,
Hmm.
the minutiae of making it sound like the record or like those bands played it live back in the day. And then the band is killer. We're an 8-piece band. There's three of us that sing, and then there's the five in the band. And I play. I'm sort of the ancillary musician, so I play third guitar and I also play
Hmm.
keys.
Okay.
But then we've got a main keys player and obviously two great guitar players in Pete and James.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, we just tour the world with an amazing sound system, amazing lights, video, so it's
Hmm.
a big production thing. And we're on a tour bus, and we live on the bus for 3 months of the year, and we go out and play shows to people. And we've got this incredible loyal fan base of people that love coming out and rocking
Mm.
out. The beauty of it is a lot of the bands either aren't touring anymore or are gone
Yeah.
or aren't in great shape. So
Hmm. Yeah.
it's we
Yeah.
do it
The
with
70s
energy.
took the toll on them.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they're just. I was talking to my girlfriend about it yesterday because obviously we just lost Brian Wilson, didn't we? And
Yeah.
and I was saying, in 10 years' time they're all going to be gone,
Yeah.
and it's I sort of live. I don't know about you, Tim, but I sort of live in that era. I mean, sort of at 60s till the sort of 1990, I suppose, roughly, is
Mm.
where 95% of the work that I do is, and I just
Yeah.
think it's such a golden period in obviously history and popular music. So
Mm.
that's what really turns me on music. I mean, there is a lot of modern stuff I love, stuff like Foo Fighters and Biffy Clyro and stuff, and I've had some of the best nights of my life going to watch them. But just musically, I don't think it gets much better than that period.
Yeah. I would probably extend out to mid 90s because I'm a bit of a grunge fan.
Oh, I love the grunge too, to be
So
fair.
yeah, but yeah, I know it's yeah, that's for me is like the golden era of music,
Mm.
60s to 90s.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's going to be anything that we're ever going to see again.
Well, it was the first time, wasn't it? And there's something so beautiful and so innocent about a lot of those songs, and they kind of had to be written to get to where we're at now. And I think that's what we've lost a little bit. It's like how, because you're trying to, you're kind of trying to kind of reshape the wheel, aren't you, all the
Mm,
time, then create
yeah,
new stuff that hasn't been done. But when you listen to something as simple as "She Loves You," or it's just how it had to be written. It's
yeah,
just, and they're just so beautiful. Speaking of Brian Wilson, I remember a few years ago I had this amazing late night post gig conversation. I was staying up in Edinburgh at my friend Robbie's house, and he is the most passionate Beach Boys fan.
right,
And we were basically having this massive argument till about 3 o'clock in the morning about who was better, the Beatles or the Beach Boys, and he was
right.
adamant that it was the Beach Boys. And it was just we were just playing each other's songs and trying to outdo one another. But I don't think Sergeant Pepper exists without Pet Sounds, does it? And I think they just inspired each other constantly throughout the
Yeah, I
60s.
mean, I think you get a bit of a feedback loop.
Exactly.
So yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't ever really see music like that, but I just think it's all like I mean, I'm not the biggest Beach Boys fan. I haven't done like a huge deep dive. I've got Pet Sounds. I've listened to that a bunch of times. I think it's fucking amazing. And
Yeah.
yeah, I've always just kind of viewed music as the two things just feed into each other, whether it's, jazz and blues or it's heavy metal and country. It's just, you find stuff that just really inspires you and really floats your boat and you just kind of run with it.
Of course, man. And there's so many crossovers, isn't there? Like you said, between all these things. I was
Mm,
just in Nashville actually last week, and I was in the Country Music Hall of Fame,
yeah.
and it's when you get to that country rock section and you start getting into like the Eagles and Crosby, Stills,
Mm,
Nash and Young, and
yeah.
you can see how it's all influenced by the stuff that came just before it, like Johnny Cash and
Yeah.
Elvis and
Yeah.
all
Yeah. Yeah.
all those things, and
Yeah.
it's amazing, man.
How was Nashville?
Oh man, it's such a cool place. Have you been out there?
Mm-mm,
Yeah, I mean,
not yet.
it's just a musical playground. I've actually been there twice this year, and I went last year as well. And so I've got to know the city a little bit. But so essentially, Broadway is the main street, and
Mm,
there's basically buildings either side that are sort of 2 or 3 stories high, some with rooftop bars, and some just 2 or 3 stories. And I'm not exaggerating by saying there is a band in every bar for about at least half a mile, maybe even a mile up this strip in on both sides of the street in every single bar from 10
hmm.
o'clock in the morning till 4 o'clock the following morning.
Right.
and it's just so loud and full of music. And the standard generally, I think, is really good. You know, that you get some traditional country, you know, playing old 50s and 60s standards. Then you get the more modern country, and then you have rock and roll cover bands and rock
Yeah.
bands and the odd jazz band here and there. But there's just music everywhere, you know.
Wow.
So, you know, as a guitar player or as a just as a musician, it's just, you just go, wow, you know, it's just I mean, it's the Music City, you know, so it's just this this celebration of specifically country music, but just music in general, you know.
Yeah.
And everyone's walking the streets with cowboy boots and it's just loud and wonderful, you know.
That's cool. I mean, it's definitely a place that I'd love to go. I mean, you know, LA and New York, and I think New York's got a really cool vibe to it.
Yeah, for sure.
But I had a few people who live in New York, and they've said, you know, it's just music scene in New York has just kind of dipped off a little bit. It wasn't like it was, certainly not in the 60s and 70s, and even the early 90s. You could still just go out and see music, and now it's just a little harder.
I think it's probably similar to London, New York in a lot of ways. You know, it's
Yeah.
quite spread out. There's a lot of other stuff going on. You know, you've got a lot of theatre. You've got a lot of, you know, you've got obviously Wall Street and a lot. You know, there's so many different facets to what New York is. Whereas Nashville is just music, basically. You know, I'm sure there's big banks and things there as well, but it's so music centric. You know, compared to London, or, you know, I guess you could compare it almost to Liverpool, you know, in the way that Liverpool was quite music focused, really.
Yeah.
Whereas London's just a big sort of melting pot of everything, isn't it?
Yeah. And so, you said just before we came on, you're in the middle of song learning. What have you got going on?
Yeah. So, I'm doing the Isle of Wight festival next weekend.
Cool.
I've done it a few times in the past with different projects with my old band Romances, and then I've done it as a solo artist as well. But I was going as a punter actually this year because I really wanted to go see Sting, who's playing on the Friday. And then I had a call a few weeks ago from a friend of mine called Josh Phillips, who was the organ player in Procol Harum for many years, and he has this band called the Blue Water Giants, and they're essentially a super group. There's Neil Taylor, who played on the Tears for Fears records, you know, that amazing solo on Everybody Wants to Rule the World. So he's in the band. And then Mark, the drummer from Big Country, and then Rhino, who played in Status Quo. So it's kind of guys who've all been in big bands in the 80s, I guess.
Okay.
And so, they call me in to sing. And so I'm sort of, I'm singing all those tunes, basically Tears for Fears and Procol Harum, and so it's a lot of stuff I haven't done before. Some I have, but there's a bunch of stuff and quite a bit of guitar playing actually. So I've been doing a lot of the Quo stuff on guitar, and I'm very much a singer that plays guitar and plays keys, if that makes sense. You know,
I'm the opposite.
Yeah. So the vocals are always the thing that I worry about the least, but I learned to play in order to. I mean, originally I was a songwriter. You know, when I was like 12 years old, I was you know, I used to basically write my own songs, and then I learned to play, so I could sing my own songs. So it was always like a tool to be able to say what I had to say.
Sure.
And it's only now, kind of in my mid 30s, that I'm sort of. I'm really trying to get better at my instruments, you know, because obviously it's important, and I really get a kick out of that. You know, if anyone ever says to me, "Oh, that bit of guitar was great," you know, that's a better compliment to me than anyone says about my voice. You know, because it's obviously I'm known for for singing rock songs. You know, so I guess it might be the same the other way around for you. If someone went, "Oh, that backing vocal was lovely," you know.
Do you know what? Somebody said that to me the other day. So, like a big chunk of my income is like weddings and functions.
Yeah.
And we did one on Saturday, like all the way up to fucking Cumbria. It was a slog.
Wow.
And they'd asked to do "Plug-in Baby" by Muse.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, we could do that. And we got through. we played it, we finished the thing, and the drummer on the drive said, he said, you fucking nailed Plug In Baby. And I thought he was talking about the guitar riff. I was like, yeah, it's
Yeah,
a
yeah,
tricky riff. He went, no, the vocals. I was like, oh, yeah. I was like, oh, thank you.
yeah,
So it's kind of that, like I always did, like I started singing when I was, I don't know, it's kind of like my mid-20s. I mean, I was always singing, but to actually go out and gig singing, kind of mid-20s. And a friend of
yeah.
mine said, if you can play guitar, you play guitar well. If you can just hold a tune and you can play Wonderwall, you could do some Beatles songs. You could go and earn money playing in pubs and restaurants and bars and stuff.
Mm.
And so he kind of pushed me to do it. And so it was always, I was a guitar player that tried to sing. And as it's kind of gone through, especially since lockdown, I don't think I've done. I can count on one hand the amount of gigs I've done where I've just played guitar.
Yeah, that's great, man.
So yeah, I'm now thinking, right, I now need to start doing it properly because I don't want to shred my voice or lose it, because then I'm really fucked.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many people have come to me over the years and said exactly what you just said. I'm a guitar player or I'm a piano player or
Yeah, yeah.
whatever, and I've been singing and I just now I want to figure out how to actually sing properly,
I'm not doing it properly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always and I feel exactly the same about playing keys and playing guitar, because it's always, there's only so many hours in the day, isn't there? But
Yeah.
obviously, I had a lot of vocal training when I was a kid. Well, I mean, I say a lot. I mean, I had enough vocal training to really help me. So I basically I started doing theatre tours when I was sort of in my early 20s,
Mm-hmm.
and I went out and did this first tour, which was a Queen show, which is obviously quite difficult stuff to sing, and then I was a good singer, but I couldn't understand why I was so inconsistent, because singing, there's a lot of variables when it comes to singing, how much sleep you've had,
Mm-hmm.
the weather, what you've had to eat or drink, how hydrated you are, how stressed you are, how
Yeah.
much you've been using your voice, how many gigs in a row. Obviously, all those things really affect you as a singer. And you have to really get to know your instrument. And so basically at that point, I went and had a lot of vocal training with a coach called Juliet Caton, who still coaches me today.
Yeah.
And she basically sorted me out. She taught me all the technique and all the science and all the muscles, and taught me that there was little muscles that you can move that I didn't even know I had, and and then I went straight onto another show called Thriller and the
Okay.
Michael Jackson thing, and I was sort of on the road for 10 months with that, doing 8 shows a week. As I know you do
Wow.
the West Endy thing, so what it's like, and then ended up in the West End with that. So I sort of had a bunch of training and then loads and loads of shows to put that into practice, and
Yeah.
sort of tweak things and try out different techniques by singing the same songs every day. So it was quite a unique way, and it was also doing rock, and I've also always been a rock and roll guy, so it was always like, how do I use these proper singing techniques, and kind of, because some of it's almost classical, the way that you learn how to use your voice properly, and the right support and the right position and the right setup and all that stuff,
Yeah.
and then sort of how does that apply to what I have that's uniquely me, which is this rock music that's just in me because I've been a fan of it since I was a child. So I guess I did a lot of my 10,000 hours sort of in my early 20s, just putting that into practice. And I'm sure it's the same on guitar. I always feel constantly guilty. Actually, listening to yours and Ollie's podcast the other
Yeah.
day, Ollie Bright, he was talking about practicing and stuff like that, and playing to a click and all that stuff. And honestly, I've done a small bit of that sort of stuff, but I've never been a guy that practices scales really, on guitar or keys. Really, I guess when I was teaching a little, when I was younger, I'd play vocal warm-ups and stuff on piano. So I guess I learnt my scales that way. But on guitar, it's the opposite of what Ollie was saying you should do, which is basically just learn songs, and
Yeah.
I've just sort of got gradually better over the years. But everyone's different, aren't they? Every musician's slightly different, and you
Yeah. I
you
mean,
can't come at it from a different angle.
yeah, I was never like the big the metronome guy with the sheet music and the music stand. I mean, I did try doing it. I had lessons with a guy who was like super methodical. He would write out a whole 8 hour practice routine, moving
Wow.
between guitar and drums, and it would be listed out like 9 o'clock, 20 minutes picking warm
Wow.
up, another 20 minutes sweeping warm up, and it would just go all through the day. 1 o'clock break for lunch, 2 o'clock like practicing rudiments in 5/4, and it's just like, and he would do that for the week. I'm like, I can't do that. That's not
Yeah.
that's not me. I said, I'll get like things that are stored in my head, like, okay, so I need to work on this, this, and this. Okay, I'll just start with this, and I'll just do it until I get bored, until my brain starts wandering. And then I'll stop.
Yeah.
I'll go and make a tea. I'll come back, like, right, let's try something else. The kids will come home from school. It's like, right, so I've got to put that down. Now I've got to go do this, and then I've got to do, right, okay, all right, now I'll come back in and do a bit more practice. And now, okay, I've got fucking songs to learn. So yeah, it was very scattered, but organized scattered, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds more like military training to me than
Mm,
making music. I mean, music should be about what gets you going and what
mm,
turns you on, right? I mean, it's music for me. Music's always been about like fun, I guess. I mean, I guess there's two like trains of thought, right? And there's the doing music because it's in your blood and you have to, and you have this urge to create and be a
mm,
musician and an artist. And then there's the kind of session musician scene, which is something I guess I became over time, sort of by default, really, with what I do now. And they're two very different mindsets because really, when to be an artist, you don't need any musical ability whatsoever. You just have to have a thing
mm,
and have a cool song. You know, when you look at all the bands that we love, stuff like Nirvana, like, you know, you mentioned grunge earlier, and I mean, there's so many examples of amazing bands that play such simple stuff, and it's just
mm.
so raw and beautiful and interesting because it's kids just thrashing about and making something and being creative. You know, a lot of
Yeah.
early Bowie and, you know, all that sort of stuff is so interesting to us all, and we love it, and it's timeless and magical and beautiful. But they probably wouldn't have had many gigs as session musicians, you know.
Yeah.
So living in 2025, you have to have a certain amount of proficiency, and this is what I always say to people. Like with my, people say, you know what, people say things like, "Oh, you're better than that guy," or "That's better than the original," or whatever.
Mm,
But my argument always is to that is that they wrote it to begin with, and they have their unique voice and sound, but my whole thing is is being able to do that on a tour consistently for 30,
hmm
40 shows a night. And, you know, I have to cover Robert Plant and Freddie and Brian Johnson and Bon Scott and Steven Tyler, you know, and so
Yeah.
I wouldn't get booked if I couldn't do that night after night after night, you know. So I
Mm,
have to be proficient enough and know my instrument enough to be able to get through it, you know.
yeah. Yeah.
And I guess it's the same on guitar. You know, if you're in an original band, you can play your thing and do your thing brilliantly, and
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. It's just music, and it's just
Yeah.
fun, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, if you're doing other people's music and you're doing it on tour, you have to, or playing in a West End show or whatever,
Yeah. Yeah.
you have to be consistent and nail that part and be technically good enough, you know. So
Mm.
I guess yeah, I guess they're two different things.
Yeah. I mean, I've spoken to lots of different musicians about doing, whether it's like cover gigs or functions or West End shows, like the array of sounds and techniques and styles that we have to be able to cover to do a show like that is fucking massive. Like you said, like
Yeah.
if I'm doing a gig, if I'm doing like Saturday, I had to cover like 50s rock and roll right the way up to sort of modern day heavy metal, and there's some jazz in there. There might be some blues. They might
Mm.
have requested some folk and country kind of stuff. Now you've got to be able to get all of those different sounds and parts and techniques
Yeah,
in. Yeah, it's not easy.
absolutely. It's not
So
easy.
I
Yeah.
tell you what, I wanted to ask you, like you met all the singers you just mentioned.
Yeah.
have unbelievable high ranges, and whenever I'm doing gigs, I'm like, I can't do AC/DC, I can't do Aerosmith, can't do Guns N' Roses. All of it's just so far out of my range,
Yeah.
and it seems to be indicative of those bands of the '80s. Is that, from a vocal perspective, is that something that you can either do or you can't, or can you be trained into it?
You can definitely learn
Yeah,
100%. Yeah, there's so many myths when it comes to singing. A lot of people go, "Oh, I'm a baritone, I can't get up there." Like, yes, you
yeah,
can. I mean, you might not be able to hit like, ridiculously high notes, but you can definitely sing almost every note you would ever need to sing a popular
okay,
music gig. You know what I mean? It's all about placement, and
hmm
it's all about your vocal setup. So, the position you put your larynx into, and then um and then it's all about like pressure and how much tension there is between what you're doing here and
hmm
what you're doing here. Um and what I always tell people, obviously, it's, when it comes to the actual setup and technique and stuff, it's we could do a whole day talking about
yeah,
that stuff, but it's essentially start quietly and try and do it quietly, and then just make sure it's safe and you can do it consistently, and then
yeah,
just gradually make it louder and louder and louder, because the difference between doing like a falsetto, I won't do it now because it's going to blow up the speakers, but doing like a falsetto note and then doing a big belty raspy note, I mean,
yeah.
you're talking like millimeters of difference in the actual position of your larynx, and then
Right.
it's
Okay.
then it's about like how much air you're letting out, and the shape of your mouth,
hmm
the amount of constriction to kind of grit up that sound.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just a technique thing, man. But you definitely can learn it. You definitely can learn it.
All right. Okay. So I'll put that on my list of things that I need to do.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, because
man.
I always listen to songs like if you take Back in Black, like just
Yeah.
that opening lyric. I was like, no, there's no way I can hit that. It's too high. It's too raspy. It will just destroy my vocal cords.
Could you do it? See, this is the thing I love talking about. Actually, Pete Thorne always laughs about this when I do it in sound check sometimes. But basically, the vocal setup for me for AC/DC is like Barry Gibb with grit, right?
Right. Yeah.
So if you can do it, if you can do it in falsetto,
Yeah.
you can do it in a full voice. It's just about knowing how. So yeah,
Okay.
where's an E? So so if you could do it quietly and thin, like really small, like meow 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 meow,
Yeah.
black, I hit the sack, and like think about Barry Gibb, like, hey, you can tell by the way I use my walk, right? If you go, black, I hit the sack, it's been a long, I'm glad to be back, right? That sounds
Yeah.
silly. It
Yeah.
sounds silly, but if you make sure you're supporting, and then you get control of what you're doing and learn how to open up that sound a little bit and
Yeah.
then make it gritty. So you go from back in line, I hit the sax. So it's a bit louder, a bit
Yeah.
more open. And then you learn to add that grit on, which is basically distorting the sound at the end of that chain. So and then you go back in line, right? It sounds really massive and impressive, but
Yeah.
actually it's I mean, it's not easy to do. It can be quite tiring, but it's probably not the hardest thing I have to do on a gig.
Okay.
I find stuff like Hotel California, which is
Right. Yeah.
clean and a bit more open and sort of in that mixy range, or stuff like um, I don't know, like The Who, that big kind of powery rock and roll stuff.
Mm.
Sometimes that's more difficult than that stuff. I mean, something like Thunderstruck's quite tough to do live.
Yeah.
But yeah, the vocal setup is always surprising to people because people think it's this basically you're just shouting your head off, and that's
Yeah.
not the case.
Okay.
Not for me anyway.
All right. Oh, what do I owe you for that lesson?
Oh, don't worry about it, mate. Buy me a beer next time you see me.
Yeah. Okay. So that's. I. I mean, I love kind of destroying myths. So.
Yeah,
So I mean, it's the long and short is it's something that's achievable not just for myself but for most people if you know the right technique and you the right placement and the right coaching.
absolutely. I think if people are if people have a fairly decent singing voice to begin with,
Mm.
then obviously, and you're dedicated enough to learn about, and because a lot about singing is like visualization. It's like learning what's actually going on in here, so
Yeah.
I find it really interesting to look at cameras down people's throats and see like what your vocal cords actually look like and what they're actually doing, and how you can manipulate them, and
Hmm.
how they're connecting, um what actually happens when you're doing falsetto and stuff like that, and
Yeah.
and then you can start to feel it, and you can go, oh, okay, I'm not doing that, I'm not doing that enough,
Yeah.
or whatever. Yeah, so you can definitely learn. I mean, obviously it's more difficult if you're kind of tone deaf and you can't sing Bar Bar Black Sheep in tune,
Yeah. Yeah.
then it's a bit more tough. But if you've got a decent enough musicality vocally to begin with,
Mm.
then for sure, you, like everything, you can definitely improve.
Right. Okay. So
Um,
that's the goal for the rest of the year then.
yeah, man. Yeah,
All
I
right.
mean, there's. No,
That's
go ahead,
cool.
go ahead.
All right. So I was just going to ask. You mentioned vocal coaching. You mentioned like how did you get into music? Basically, how was your doorway into music?
Yeah, well, I mean, my family aren't particularly musical, to be honest. I mean, my mum's got a lovely voice, but she was always too shy to kind of to sing in front of anyone, really. I think when she was really young, she sang in church and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Um, and she owned a guitar, I always say, which probably winds her up. But she did used to play the odd
Hmm.
song to us when we were kids. Um, but she's not really musical. She definitely wasn't a pro. And my dad isn't musical, although he loves doing Johnny Cash or Daydream Believer on karaoke. But
Yeah.
he he's such a massive rock and roll fan.
Yeah.
So I was just surrounded by that stuff as a kid, So he was always playing the Beatles. I mean, the Beatles are my favorite band. I know it's cliche, but
Hmm.
they just always have been. So, and they're his favorite band too. So it was the Beatles and um, Clapton and Bryan Adams and Bowie, and he was just always playing music in the house, always, always. So it sort of seeps into me really young, and I don't know where it came from, mate, but I was just always singing. Even at 5, 6 years old, Mum said, when she put Disney videos on, I was just always singing along,
Mm.
almost before I could talk, and then it was little things like school concerts and any sort of karaoke competition on holiday. My parents would always get me up there,
Yeah.
um, and they were really they were kind of really supportive. I always feel so bad for people who say they didn't have supportive parents, because they were just from the age of, well, really young, but especially when I got to about 10, when I started doing I joined a theatre company. I think I might have been 11 actually, which was like a little local Amdram theatre company called Starmaker in Reading,
Yeah.
which is where I grew up. And so I was going there Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, doing shows, whether it be Les Miserables or Annie or whatever, when I was a
Yeah.
kid, um, and starting to write my own songs around that same age. So they bought a guitar, and I was sort of learning to play, and um, the two always sort of coincided. And I always think this is really interesting, because it sort of what I started doing as an 11, 12-year old, which is basically being in shows, um, performing on the theatre stage, learning how to, what it's like to be at theatre, B-side stage, where you stand on stage, the lighting, how you engage an audience, all that stuff, and also writing songs and being in a rock and roll band.
Mm.
It's kind of exactly what I'm doing now as a job.
Yeah.
Doing theatre shows and rock shows now, touring. Um, I've kind of been doing it since I was 12, but sort of by accident. So I started my first band when I was 14 in school. So I was always writing songs, performing, covers of Red Hot Chili Peppers and Queen and, all that sort of stuff. So the two always coincided. So I'd go and do gigs with my band. And when I got to about 15, we started gigging for money, doing
Hmm.
pub gigs and, like you said, weddings and all that sort of stuff. And we used to, I was talking to someone about this the other day, actually. We used to take two JCM 900s with 4x10s into a pub, 2 massive amps plus an Ampeg SVT 8 by
Oh
10,
man.
and a drum kit and a full rack with a desk on top, to do like the plough in Tilehurst.
Yeah.
And and it was just amazing times, and yeah, doing rock and roll gigs, we thought we were the bee's knees. And just writing songs and being in studios and recording albums and stuff from that young age. And I guess I just got better over time, and then yeah, like I said earlier, in my early 20s, I sort of accidentally really fell into the kind of theatre world. Was working in a school and a studio, and it was actually where I went to school. So I'd sort of gone off and done some gigs for a few years with my friends in the band I was in at the time, called The Quote. So we sort of had what I call my uni years, which is basically us living in a house together and doing loads of gigs and getting pissed, basically.
Yeah.
And then I went back to work in my old school in the music department as like a music technician. And it was the specific moment is my old boss, and she was a lovely person, Ellie, and she asked me to clean out the store cupboard, which I knew hadn't been cleaned since before I went to school there. So we're talking like I'd been there from the age of 10 to 18, and I'm now 22, and this thing hasn't been cleaned, and it's that thick with dust. And I was wearing yellow rubber gloves and a dust mask. And I had sort of an old camera phone then, which was really dodgy quality, but I took a picture of myself in the mirror in the toilet, and I just remember calling my dad and being like, "What the fuck am I doing with my life? Cleaning out this store cupboard." And the following week, a friend of mine said, "Do I want to audition for this show?" And I went and did it, and got the gig. And then I ended up sort of my entry into sort of the sort of touring rock and roll theatre world, which was that Queen show called Bohemian Rhapsody. And then from that, I got an agent who then the first audition he got me was Thriller. So I sort of ended up on this sort of path of doing this sort of rock and roll stuff, really. So that's sort of the start of my journey, really. And then since then, it's just been different projects have built up over time, to the point now where I'm super lucky because I just basically most of my year is covered by sort of a few different projects that I do. So obviously there's a classic rock show, which is a big chunk of my year. And then I do a show called the London Symphonic Rock Orchestra now as well. And then I do a Led Zeppelin symphonic show. And then we touched on it, but I'd love to talk about it, which is my 1971 show, which is my baby, basically. It's a show that I produce and I created.
Okay.
And that's
Tell
sort
us
of
about that.
Yeah. So basically, a few years ago, I read a book by David Hepworth called Rock's Golden Year, and it's all about 1971, basically. And I'm turning the pages and I'm going, this is like all my favorite music. And I just could not believe that all this music was released in 1971. So, from Blue by Joni Mitchell to Tapestry by Carole King to Led Zeppelin 4 to Who's Next, so just there you've got, all those incredible songs. You've got obviously Stairway to Heaven, Black Dog, Rock and Roll. You've got, Won't Get Fooled Again, Barbara O'Reilly. And then you've got stuff like Tiny Dancer, Elton John, Maggie May, Rod Stewart, Stay With Me, Faces, Brown Sugar by the Rolling Stones, LA Woman, The Doors, Have You Ever Seen the Rain by Creedence. It just goes on and on and on. It's unbelievable for someone like me and you who weren't there the first time around to go, what do you mean that was released the week before that? And what do you mean that wasn't a number one? Because that was in the charts. It's like the Bowie stuff that came out that year, John Lennon, Imagine, it's just endless. And there's been a TV documentary on Apple TV about that year. And basically I was as I was reading, I was going, I have to make this a show. This is like such a cool show because a lot of the stuff I'm involved with is very rock centric. Obviously that's what I'm known for, is singing rock stuff. But actually my heart is sort of slightly more in the singer-songwriter / rock thing. I guess that's where I kind of see myself most naturally. Like I said, the Beatles are my favorite band, so it's sort of it's rock-ish, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I love, the Carpenters and Joni Mitchell and Carole
Hmm.
King, and Don McLean, so all that stuff. This is just a massive outlet for me to
Play all
to
your favorite
play
songs.
all my favorite stuff, basically. But it's also what I'm finding. It also happens to be a lot of other people's favorite songs, and
Yeah,
I think in 2025 and again, I'm not slagging anybody off by saying this, but I think there's a lot of lowest common denominator stuff because producers want to make money and they're scared that um, if you don't stop believing and living on a prayer and whatever it is, that audiences won't come, and I,
yeah,
I just think there's been a little bit of a dumbing down from a lot of productions that I see. It's like, and that's fine. And if you want to go out and watch that and have a lot of fun, and you can see that in a pub or in a theater or
yeah,
or whatever, a wedding, whatever, that is totally cool. But I definitely think there is still space to go and watch somebody play Superstar by the Carpenters
hmm,
or Vincent by Don McLean, and I just, but also introduce the rock and roll stuff like Barbara O'Reilly and Stairway to Heaven, and that's what I love about the show because it creates this space of, it's like kind of like a time capsule
mm,
of this, where you can kind of go cross genre in a way because it goes from singer songwriter to some stuff is slightly more jazzy, like the Joni Mitchell stuff, into the real kind of rock and roll stuff. But it all feels, and we even do this a Stevie Wonder version of "We Can Work It Out," which came
yeah,
out that year. Um, and it all feels like it fits in this kind of amazing menagerie of music
mm,
from '71. So um, that was kind of what I wanted to do, a show that kind of ask questions of the audience, but also gives you space to be able to play yes and to be able to
yeah,
play, the slightly more proggy stuff and the singer songwriter stuff. So it's sort of songbook meets rock and roll gig basically. And the band I've put together, I think that's my greatest achievement with the show
mm,
is the musicians I've put together. Obviously Ollie,
yeah,
um,
and
CJ
CJ
Evans
as
on
well.
drums. Yeah, everyone knows CJ.
Everyone knows CJ.
The man in 1,000 bands.
Yeah,
Um, Yeah, CJ is obviously amazing. John Clifford Cox on bass.
yeah.
Adam Chinnery, who's just, and I don't know if you know Adam, but he
I
is just the
don't
most magnificent guitar player. Um, and Hayley Sanderson as well, who's a friend of mine from Strictly. We sang on Strictly Come Dancing together,
know. Okay.
and she, she's got a CV as long as my arm as well, but she's amazing as well. So, and we're all kind of multi-instrumentalist, so we sort of switch instruments and
Hmm.
stuff where it's appropriate. And so yeah, it's a great team, great group of people, and yeah, I'm just excited for what's next. Really, we've done about 6 or 7 shows so far, or
Yeah,
something like that. So
yeah, yeah. I mean,
yeah,
I saw it when I think it was. I'm sure it was CJ posted it, and I took a look at it. I was like 1971. So clearly, okay. And I'm saying to myself, this is obviously a gig, but they just play songs from 1971. And I was like, my initial thought was, that's brave.
yeah,
But then you start looking at the songs and you're going, it's actually not that brave. That's
yeah,
actually a fucking good set list.
mate.
But
There's
I thought the idea of it was amazing. Like, as someone that kind of grew up in the 90s, I immediately went, you could do a 1991 show.
yeah,
Because when you look at the albums that were released from 91, like Blood Sugar Sex Magic, there was Nevermind, the Black Album by Metallica. I think there was a Soundgarden album as well. I think, uh, what's the Soundgarden album? With Jesus Christ Pose on it. It's
I
fucking
can't tell
gone.
you, mate.
It's fucking gone. But yeah, I thought that a 1991 show that would be fucking great because you've got
Yeah.
so many great songs from that. Or you could do 1987, or you just
Well,
pick a
that's the
year.
beauty of it, or 73 is a great year, 77.
Yeah,
Obviously, when we come out, the whole point of the show is that it's the greatest year in rock and roll. That's the
yeah,
that's the tagline, But obviously, I'm being a little facetious because obviously there's some great music from many years, but you know, who knows? In 5 years' time, maybe we come out and we do 77 or
yeah,
73,
yeah,
and then you can do Fleetwood Mac and all
yeah,
that
yeah,
stuff. It's it's never ending really. But to be honest with you, I obviously people say that to me a lot. They're like, would you want to do any other year? And honestly, I could do 10 set lists just
Yeah,
from 71. It's
yeah,
unbelievable the stuff that we don't include in the show just because you don't have time, because,
yeah.
for every Barbara O'Reilly, there's another song on that album. Like, there's Won't Get Fooled Again, and then there's Behind Blue Eyes. And then on
Mm,
Led Zeppelin 4, you got Stairway to Heaven and Black Dog and Rock and Roll. And you can't do all of them.
yeah,
I mean, Tapestry by Carole King, you could do any one of those songs.
yeah.
So the show is fluid and never ending, really. Of what we could do.
Mm.
So yeah, I'm really excited about that.
It's cool, and also
Yeah,
I think niching down is a great idea. I think if you
yeah,
try to kind of, like you said, if you try and cover everything, you try and do all the living on a prayer, you're doing Journey, all that kind of stuff. But if you start to niche down a little bit, you start to then specialize, and then people will know you for the thing.
yeah.
And
I
I
think
think
you've hit the
that's
nail on the head there about my career in general, Tim. To be honest, because honestly, I always say this in a little bit of a sort of passive aggressive way, but I have never sung "Shut Up and Dance," and
you lucky bastard.
I have never sung "Get Lucky."
Yeah,
I don't think actually. Maybe I did that once years ago, but basically, just honestly, I just don't like that shit, and
yeah,
people don't want to hear me sing it. I'm known for being the rock and roll guy, and I'm maybe this is a blown up sense of self importance, but I think I'm probably one of about let's say 10 people in London where if
mm,
someone needs a rock singer for a session or for a gig, I'm one of the names that comes up.
yeah,
Because I'm known for being that dude.
mm,
And it's not fake. I'm not putting it on. The music is in my heart and soul. I've been listening to it since I was 5 years old. And, if you want something that sounds a bit Robert Plant or a bit Iggy Pop or a bit whatever, I can cover it because I know it. and,
yeah,
and it's, and it's definitely stood me in good stead. I sometimes think maybe that's the wrong advice to give a drummer or to give a keys player, or 'cause when I've done a few master classes for schools and stuff before. But honestly, the way I look at it is that if people know what you do and you're
mm,
good at it and you're nice
yeah,
to work with and you're a nice person, I think you're probably more likely overall to get more work that you love and that you enjoy doing,
mm,
rather than being a bit of a jack of all trades. Obviously, like you said earlier, there's nothing wrong with being able to do all that stuff, because when, if you're in the West End and you want to be a reader and a pit player, you have to be able to cover all those bases. I'm
mm,
not able to do that.
yeah,
Um, I'm not a good enough musician to do that, but and vocally I'm pretty versatile within rock, but I'm not gonna, like in that Marvin Gaye released What's Going On in 1971. I'm not going to
yeah,
put that in my show because I'm not the right guy to sing it.
right, yeah, yeah,
And I
yeah,
know that, and I think I'm self-aware enough to go, this is what I'm good at. Um, and and I think that's sort of why I'm at where I'm at with my career, because people know that that's what I do,
mm,
and I kind of, I get booked for it. I mean, ironically, going back to what I just mentioned, what Strictly Come Dancing, that was the biggest sort of out of the comfort zone thing that I've done, and probably in my whole career, because you get everything thrown at you,
yeah,
from musical theatre um to a Scooby Doo. I had to sing on there, to a sped up auto tuned version of Despacito in Spanish, and then something in Afrikaans, and then it's just that was a real test of musicianship, and having to be able to read and do all the harmonies, and
yeah,
it's a really really tough gig, that one. um and they originally got me in because they wanted someone to sing Whole Lot of Love, and then
mm,
it didn't even end up getting used on the show. And then same
no,
same thing, exactly the same deal as the classic rock show. It was like, can you come in? We need a rock singer for this one day, and then I ended up staying there for 2 years. So it was one
yeah,
of those type of situations. And it was a real challenge, but honestly, it was tough. And
mm,
massive respect to all the guys in that band and the other singers, because the amount of bases they have to cover is insane, and that was definitely a challenge for me. And the last few years, since I haven't been doing Strictly, I've been doing a lot more kind of just rock and roll, and it's made me appreciate how much I love doing that stuff actually.
Yeah.
And so yeah,
It's cool. I
yeah,
mean, it's good to be called on for stuff that you're not necessarily known for, and you go in and go, you know what, I did a good job.
yeah,
I'm pleased with that.
yeah,
That's
exactly.
cool. The other thing, before I let you go, I mean, as somebody that's, you know, you're obviously working a lot, you're out gigging, you're out on the road. Like, what are you working on to actively kind of get better? Or what is getting? Well, I'll tell you what. Let's rephrase it. What does getting better mean to you today versus what does it mean to you, or what did it mean to you 20 years ago?
Yeah, so I think if you'd have asked me 20 years ago, it would have been, well, I'd have been 15, so I'd have been totally focused on my songs,
Yeah.
and I would have said it's about trying to get better as a writer. And
Hmm.
I still feel that way. Bizarrely, after everything I've done and all the touring I do and all that stuff, I still consider myself a songwriter first,
Hmm.
and it's still the thing that gives me the most guilt that I'm not doing it enough.
Yeah.
So because that's why I started doing music in the first place. I started playing guitar so I could, you know, write, so I could play my own songs. So I I guess that was always part of it for me. But now I think I think I look at getting better as like growth as a musician and all that that means. And since I turned 30, I think that has been most sort of obvious and prevalent in myself as a business person.
Hmm.
And this might be a slightly different take on it than some of the other people you've had on, but I started to get a lot more in tune with what it means to be a business person, an entrepreneur, how to look
Yeah.
after my money,
Yeah.
how to make sure I value myself enough, how to negotiate,
Yeah.
how to ask for more money, um, how to be a good person to work with, um, and then how to. I think, like I was just talking about 71, I genuinely mean it. I'm most proud of the fact that I've got that team of people together because I'm de facto MD because I produce the show, but I don't have to say barely anything because
Yeah.
I chose the right people, and I think that's a skill as well, you know. So learning how to put people together, learning how to manage people, learning how to deal with any issues that arise, learning how to communicate. Um, and I've sort of put a lot of stock into that. I've also sort of been on this journey the last few years of like fitness as well, like trying to
Hmm.
keep myself as fit as possible. I'm probably in the best shape I've ever been in, which has a lot to do with diet. Actually, I changed my diet about a year ago,
Yeah.
um, and stuff like that, and things that just basically keep me sane, keep me healthy. I walk a lot with my dog.
Hmm.
Um, and so that being said, as I'm saying this, as a musician, you're asking me about getting better. I realize that all those things could also be reasons why I'm probably not getting better on my instruments, because I should be practicing more, and obviously, I do practice, and like I said, I'm in full song learning mode at the moment, so I've been playing a lot of guitar and stuff. But I think for me, it's been about trying to change and evolve so I'm not just reliant on other people
Hmm.
to call me and get gigs. I've always been a person that kind of I guess similar to you, mate. Like I did during the pandemic, I started a podcast, which is still out there if people want to go
Yeah.
but listen back to it. Um, and called Staying Alive. And you know, I always ran bands. I wasn't just in the band. I was always the one that booked the gigs and
Yeah.
arranged, did the schedule and paid everybody. And so for me, it's been a journey of getting better at all that stuff and learning how to deal with clients and promoters and agents and bookers and then not always on every gig, but a lot of the time I'm the one booking hotels and booking
Hmm.
flights, and all that stuff comes with experience, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And that's definitely been something that I'm proud of that I've got better at. Um, And yeah, sort of. So I guess it's about expanding what being a musician means.
Yeah.
Um, Making sure that my job as a musician is sustainable, because like everything, you've only got a great gig until you don't anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's about making sure if you don't have a gig, then you're going and creating one for yourself, and coming up with ideas for new projects or new bands or new concepts, or making sure that you're good enough on Logic, or you have your, so I'm here in my little home studio. I've got a great home recording setup, so I do a lot of sessions for
Hmm.
people. Um, I can't say the word sessions without thinking of Ricky Gervais. Um, Sessions. But yeah, doing a lot of home recording, stuff like that. Getting proficient on Logic or Pro Tools or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Um, so that if someone says, "Can you do this?" then you can do it, and like stuff like video editing, and all these little things that make you more of a valuable asset for somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so that, yeah, I think I've just described pretty well why I'm not a very good keys or guitarist.
Okay, and let's say if you're given something to learn and you can't do it, what's your process of going from I can't do it to yeah, got it?
I think I think what
Whether it's vocally or you have to do something on guitar or
yeah,
keys.
I think vocally, um it's more about finding the placement for it,
Mm,
like we spoke about earlier. So that just comes from singing it a few times and going, okay, this is where I place it, really. So I don't worry too much about that. But
yeah,
guitar, it's very much just I guess it's boring, isn't it? But it's just a very much over and over again type thing. Like I
yeah.
have to on this gig next week. I've got to play the first solo, the Rick Parfitt on "Rockin' All Over the World."
Okay.
Which to me is a big deal. Because I've not traditionally been someone that plays guitar solos on stage. I'm always the third guitarist in the band, so I'm always the one going jing 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 in the
Yeah.
background. So and on tour in the Classic Rock show, was it last year or the year before? We did "Wish You Were Here." So
Okay.
I was doing the vocal and guitar unison thing, like all that stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and that for me was the moment of the show that made me the most nervous.
Okay.
But I always say I always think this is a nice tidbit, because I always say that all the hard work is done here,
Hmm.
because my whole philosophy is that you have to know it to a point where it's just totally second nature, and you're not thinking about the lyrics or the chords or the part.
Yeah.
Because when you're on a stage and there's people that have paid to come and watch you, for me, your whole responsibility, especially as a singer, is to deliver the message of the song to those people, right?
Hmm.
To get across the feeling of the song that you're coming across. So if you're thinking about that high note that you're going to struggle if you can hit it, or you're thinking about the lyrics or the
Yeah.
chords, then it's about you, and it
Yeah.
becomes a selfish thing. And I genuinely think that your responsibility is, if you need to do it 1,000 times in your rehearsal studio until you can do it without thinking about it, then you have to do that, because it has to be about the audience. It has
Yeah.
to be about how you're delivering it to them in that
Hmm.
moment. So that's the way I look at it. And I always try and be the most prepared person in the room.
Yeah.
Which, if you're playing with great people, is hard. But I always, at the very least, you've listened to the songs hundreds and hundreds of times, so the nuance of where it's going. You're not second guessing, like, am I going to the bridge here, or is there another
Yeah.
8 bars, or obviously the more you listen to the music, the more those little backing vocals pop out of you, or that little mandolin part or percussion part that you
Mm.
haven't heard. And those details are things that I really love, and in the bands that I'm involved with, they're important, because we try and do those as faithfully as we can.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just about repetition, and listening, and doing it until um
You can't fuck it
until
up.
it's automatic. Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
And then you still fuck it up sometimes, don't you? But then
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
then people are on your side. I had
Yeah.
a great one in the States, actually. I was out doing Led Zeppelin Symphonic, and we did Fall in the Rain by Led Zeppelin. And it was just one of those moments that, I don't know if you get this, but as a singer, if you can't remember the first word to the song, you're just screwed. If you
Yeah.
know the first word, normally you're
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
And it was I sang the third verse to the song three times, three times in a row. And I just could not remember there's a light in your eye that keeps shining. I know it now, but
Yeah.
and I sang, and if you promise to love so completely, and I sang that verse three times in a row. Then I remembered where I was, sang the fourth verse, and then at the end of the song, I just made a joke about it. Because if you're at Led Zepp Symphonic show, the chances are everyone in that room knows those words. They're
Yeah.
Led Zepp fans,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I just said, I love the third verse of that song so much, I
Yeah.
sang it for you three times. And
Third
they all
verse is the
laughed.
best verse.
Yeah, exactly. And everyone laughed, and it shows that you're not taking yourself too seriously. And also, as an audience member, you never mind if someone messes up, because that's what we love about live music, right? It's the
Mm.
jeopardy of it. It
Yeah.
could all go to shit any moment.
Yeah.
So people want you to do well. They're not willing you to make a mistake.
Yeah.
So, um, so yeah, I guess that's what getting better means, mate. It's just like practicing over and over again until it's not about you anymore. I
Yeah.
suppose.
I heard a great quote. I never remember where I read these scrolling around on Instagram, that it was something to the tune of, like, amateurs play it until they get it right, pros play it until they can't get it wrong.
Right. Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
was like, yeah, that kind of sums up,
That's a
you know,
good one.
going out and doing a gig.
Yeah, absolutely,
Anyway,
man.
listen, mate, it was lovely to chat to you. Thank you so much for coming on.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me, man.
It
And good
was
luck with
it
the
was
pod.
yeah, thank you. It was a joy to talk to you.
Oh, mate, the privilege is all mine.
Thank you.